we need to. So thank you everybody for joining us here within the Zoom or watching us live online. Yeah, we'll get started. Again, thank you for coming to our panel discussion today, talking about the LatinX community in Rochester, hosted by Erase. So I'm just going to give you a short introduction to who we are as Erase, and a little bit about kind of who we are, what we're doing, what we've done, and then I'll introduce our wonderful panelists. So let's begin. At any time, if you have questions, if you're watching, or if you're a part of the Zoom, you can type a question within the chat here, and we have one of us will respond to that. And then if you're watching via the Facebook stream, we also have Nick from one of our Erase steering committee members monitoring that chat, so he can address any questions there too. So if you have them, don't be afraid to ask. All right, let's roll. So just a little background about Erase, who we are. Erase is an acronym, stands for Eliminating Racism and Seeking Equity in Irondequoit. We were founded in June 2020, so we're pretty new, and we really arose first just as a Facebook group, kind of responding to both the larger events happening with George Floyd and then the protests that we saw here within Rochester. And it really just started as a collective group of people who are concerned about making an impact on racism in Rochester, and kind of through a few changes, we formed into what we are today. We decided those of us that are involved as the leadership team of Erase, we decided we didn't want to just be people chatting on a Facebook page, but we wanted to be an active organization leading actual change in Irondequoit and Rochester overall. So our mission statement is to eradicate racism of all forms, promote activism, and improve equity through diversity. So you have a picture here of our admin team. My name is Mike Huntone. I am the vice secretary on our steering committee. And within our chat today, too, we have Tahani Wade, who's our president. Looks like Melissa Sidor is here. She is our vice treasurer. We have a number of other people on the team, too. I will walk through all of it right now. All right. So just some of the events that we have organized and led in the short time that we've been an active organization. Our first big event was the Candlelight Vigil on Juneteenth, which is the first Juneteenth event Irondequoit had ever had. We also organized a Black Lives Matter rally and march at the beginning of August in Irondequoit. So if you remember, anyone saw us marching down Titus, we closed that down and marched to Town Hall and let Irondequoit know that we have a strong community here standing up for racial equity in this town. We also held the first of our panel discussions, Let's Talk Reality of Racism, that was focused on Black Lives Matter and the Black community within Irondequoit and Rochester. That was a live panel discussion, and of course, today with how beautiful it is, it probably would have been a wonderful day to be live, but who would have thought in Rochester that November 7th would be a gorgeous day? So those of you, especially our panelists who are sacrificing some of your gorgeous day to be in, chatting with us and participating, thank you. All right, and we also have our Vote Wall Murals, one at I-Square. That's a chalkboard wall, so check that out if you hadn't. Even though the election's over, voting's always important, and it's important for us to stay engaged. And speaking of that, we had an I Vote event on the first day of early voting that was led by one of our panelists here who's an Erase member, so we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to go through our panelists really quick, just give an intro. For each of you, when I get through, I'll read some highlights here, and then I'll give you just a second if you want to add in a word or two. All right, so our first panelist is Alex Castro. Alex is the Chief Executive Officer at Pat Stone's Corporation, which is a private, not-for-profit regional community development and human service organization based in Rochester. Alex oversees all operations in 7 states and Puerto Rico, where Pat Stone's provides services with 550 employees and an $80 million budget. Prior to joining Pat Stone, Alex was the executive director of the Rochester Housing Authority, which is a real estate holding company providing affordable housing here in Rochester. And he was also the executive director of the Housing Council, which is now the Housing Council at Pat Stone. Alex's housing experience extends over 20 years working with real estate development, public housing, Section 8 vouchers, landlord-tenant issues, as well as property management and housing counseling. In 2007, Alex successfully completed a Master's of Business Administration from the Simon School of Business at University of Rochester. Among his many accomplishments, he was a 40 under 40 honoree in 2006. He holds a Six Sigma certification and has provided volunteer leadership to many community initiatives. So I see we have Alex with us. Alex, if you, we'll give you the spotlight quick. If you just want to give a quick hello to everyone here, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. I apologize. I was telling LT, we had an unfortunate, a good friend of ours just passed away. So we had a funeral today. So I'm driving back on my way home. So as soon as I get home, I'll hop in on video. But for now, you have me on voice. Thank you.
All right, we appreciate you being here with us, Alex, and I'm sorry to hear about that. Yeah, so whenever what's convenient with you, we'll jump around. All right. Our next panelist is Henry Ignacio Padron Morales. Henry, oh, hold on. Hold on one moment, technical issue. Sorry, everybody. Okay, sorry about that. Henry is the co-owner of Hippocampo Books, Children's Books, LLC, which is the region's only woman Latinx owned independent bookstore. He's a retired kindergarten, early childhood, bilingual and dual education teacher with the Rochester City School District. He participates in a broad range of activist, artistic, and intellectual pursuits. He's a published author whose work is archived in the Hunter College Center for Puerto Rican Studies. He taught at Writers and Books for decades. He has written, collaborated, and been published in poetry anthologies, academic subject matter, focusing in early childhood education and linguistic research. Some of his recent accomplishments have been involvement with the United Way Virtual Leadership Series, the New York State Migrant Education Virtual Summer Camps. He's a facilitator with the Yucayeke Book Group. He was honored at the Hispanic Heritage Month 2020 Volunteer Award. He's hosted a Hippocampo virtual story time during the COVID pandemic, making sure the kids still get their stories even in our pandemic times now. And he's also participating entrepreneur at La Marqueta. So thank you, Henry. Henry, if you just want to say a few quick words, the floor is yours.
I would like to say, first of all, thank you to Erase for the invitation, and congratulations on the very important work that you are doing. And I look forward to the rest of this event.
All right, thanks, Henry. Okay, next we have Stephanie Paredes. And Stephanie enjoys sharing her love and passion for creativity, inclusion, and diversity. She's been at RIT, where she is currently the Assistant Director of Multicultural Programming in the Division for Diversity and Inclusion. She's been working at RIT for 11 years, working to celebrate and educate about intersectionality, inclusion, and the beauty and difference. She's one of the lead consultants at Beyond Boundaries Consulting, which focuses on cultural competency training, leadership, hold on.
It's okay.
Nope, sorry, I had something cut off here. She's also involved in leadership development and grant writing. She's the co-founder of the Rochester Latino Theater Company Incorporated and is the owner of Empanadas by Stephanie. So if we were in person, I would have asked Stephanie to please bring some of those because I'm sure they're delicious.
I would have brought some anyway. You know, the Dominican in me always brings food somewhere. So.
All right, awesome. Okay, and let's see, and we've got our next panelist is Rosa Vargas Cronin. And, oh, wait a second. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Stephanie, I know you already talked about the deliciousness of your empanadas. Do you just want to take another moment to say hi?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here. This glorious, beautiful change of day. So welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here among these wonderful panelists, and I'm excited to get into this wonderful conversation. So thank you all for having me, and thank you, Erase, for putting this together.
Thanks for joining us, Stephanie. All right, and our next panelist is Rosa Vargas Cronin. So sorry, I jumped ahead there just a second. So Rosa brings to us over 15 years serving as a bilingual speech and language pathologist in New York City and in Rochester. She's currently a board of trustee member at the Irondequoit Public Library, which is my personal favorite Irondequoit institution outside of Erase, of course. And she's also a member of the Rochester Teachers Union. Rosa is also, I think I mentioned earlier, Rosa is a member of Erase. She's a representative on our community engagement task force. And the iVote event that I mentioned earlier in our recent events was really her brainchild, which the task force piece is kind of the evolution, a new step forward for Erase. And, you know, Rosa's really been engaged with us through Erase from the beginning. And I know she was very passionate about getting involved as a task force member. And it was awesome to see that pretty much as soon as we launched the task forces, Rosa really spearheaded that iVote event that was really impactful. It was a really cool event. And again, it was just awesome to see her take that initiative and take the lead as soon as those task forces started. So Rosa's got a lot of heart and passion and commitment to our cause, and she's already making changes now. So Rosa, if you just want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Rosa Vargas Cronin. I'm also a Dominicana, so love it. I'm also celebrating today because the heavens are blue. And yes, I am. It's a happy day for sure. It's been amazing to be a part of Erase. It's really been like, I'm a transplant from New York City, and since we came here, oh my God, what now, 8 years ago, I've been looking for organizations that do what Erase do, and it's really amazing. And I feel really honored to be a part of the change that Erase is making happen. So I'm just excited about what's going to be next and all the new things that will have to come. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Rosa, and we're excited to have you in Erase. So I did want to highlight, we had one other panelist that had to cancel just last minute due to a late change of plans, but I did want to honor her because Gabby is really impressive and has been actively involved with Erase from the beginning. So just to make sure, I want everybody to know Gabby's out there, and this is the kind of person that our community is blessed to have, and I'm sure we'll all be hearing much more from her going forward. Gabby is a student at Nazareth College. She's majoring in public health with a double minor in social work and global issues. She was a 2018 graduate right here in Irondequoit. She's an organizer for Irondequoit Black Lives Matter. So she actually ahead of when we did our Irondequoit BLM march, she led a student-led Black Lives Matter protest at I-Square that we were happy to partner with her on. You know, and as it mentions here, she's actively involved with Free the People Rock and the Rochester Tenants Union. So, you know, here at Erase, you know, we love seeing the youth involved, and Gabby is, you know, one of the best. She's been very outspoken about issues that she's personally experienced and what she sees happening in the community and around her, and she's not afraid to get involved. So, you know, Gabby has partnered with us on a lot of the events we've held. So she's just an awesome person. Again, unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, but you know, this is a name I'm sure that we will all be hearing from more in the future. So these are our panelists. Just some info here about how to find a race, and we can post that, or if someone has questions, they can drop it in either of the chats. So just a couple things. I just want to go over kind of how this will work, what our focus is, and then we'll get started. So our focus today is really to talk about the Latino community, Latina community here in Rochester, kind of some of the intersectionality with a lot of this stuff that we've talked about prior with a race with Black Lives Matter, looking at racism and how it affects this community. You know, this means something to me because I'm of Puerto Rican heritage, but we're a diverse community. And I think that's something that has been, you know, for better and worse, in the news cycle a lot this week. So I think it's important that we have this discussion and kind of talk through, just talk about what our community is here. You know, what are some of the issues that we face here in Rochester, along with nationally, and just some of that intersectionality with, you know, the other racial justice issues. So, you know, my role here as the MC of events is we have a set group of questions. So we'll have 5 or 6 questions that I'll start with asking the panel, and we'll go through. So we're just going to go in order with our panelists. We'll go one by one, give them a chance to spend a couple minutes just giving their thoughts on the questions. So that'll be the first 5 or 6 questions. And then at the end, we have a couple more questions that we'll open it up. Anyone that's in the Zoom can answer. So when we get to that piece, I'll talk about how that'll work. Yeah, so we'll get started. And yeah, let me stop sharing here. And again, as I mentioned before, if you're watching via Zoom and you have questions, you can drop them in the Zoom chat, or if you're watching through the live stream, you can post them in the live stream chat, and one of us will answer them or address them. So let me just get myself set up over here, and we'll get started. One of the things, actually, I want to, this isn't one of our questions. I'm already going off the rails, but I'll leave it up to my 4 panelists here. You don't all have to answer this, but you can if you want to. I think, you know, as I mentioned, kind of Latina community has been in the news a lot lately. And I think one of the questions, you know, both inside or more outside the community is, so some of the terms we use, right? The LatinX, Latino, Latina, Hispanic. You know, everybody has different views on the different terms, the background with them. You know, for our audience that isn't as, or that might be wondering, I don't know if anyone would like to just take a few and kind of talk about personally, you know, what do they mean to you? Do you have a preferred one? You know, how do you identify yourself? Something like that. So yeah, if any one of you wants to ask, so we can practice the raise your hand and we could spotlight you.
Hi. It is a really interesting term for me because I've always, when you see me, the first thing you see is a person of color. And that's always been my way of identifying myself. I actually did my genetics recently, and I'm 58% Nigerian. So I do. I've always, even as a kid, I remember in the Bronx, I hung out with the Jamaican girls, and you know, I've always considered myself a person of color. Now, yeah, it is definitely how I see myself. So I see myself, I don't really call myself Latina or Hispanic, even though, you know, that 38% Italian is in there too. But I consider myself Afro-Caribbean. That's how I want myself to be seen as.
Awesome, thanks, Rosa. Looks like Stephanie, you want to share too?
Yeah, I think the evolution of terms is it's just going to keep evolving and keep changing as we start to really dig deeper into identity. I work in the world of diversity and inclusion, and so I think words do matter and words are important. But I also think understanding that just because a term is used with society, or this is the new term that people are using, we have to make sure that we're asking each individual person what they would like to be referred to as, what is their identity? Because it's so easy to kind of assume based on what people look like, what they would like to be called. And so I think it's important in my world of diversity and inclusion, you know, when I look at the term Latinx, to me, that's inclusive, right? There's no feminine or masculine approach to that. A lot of people may not understand where Latinx come from. Why is that important? Why is it even an option? I'm always a proponent of like, the more options you give me, the better, because then people can choose whatever they want. I personally identify as Afro-Latina because I think in my own discovery of identity and what that means and what I had access to, you know, before, yes, I called myself a Latina, thinking it meant something different. And then when I learned about the term Afro-Latina, for me, it was like, oh yeah, that makes much more sense for me. Because I think it also lends itself to identifying all the pieces that I see myself as and who my people are. And so I choose Afro-Latina as that. But I say the more the merrier, give people the options they want.
Love it. Thanks, Stephanie. Alex, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you for your patience. I made it home. I'm now in Zoom. So thank you. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Rosa. How are you guys doing? You know, it's interesting. I had to adopt a category to call myself once I moved to the United States. For the first 19 years of my life, I didn't have to categorize myself. So I tend to prefer, you know, I'm your neighbor, I'm your coworker, I'm the person whose kids are in school with your kids. And I tend to view those categories more as a census category than actually how I identify myself. Again, I'm just your neighbor.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Henry, do you want to jump in at all?
Sure. As has been mentioned, it's an evolving term, the semantics of it. So it comes from somewhere, it's here now, and it will continue into the future. I don't have a problem with the terminologies. I think that I choose to I was born in Brooklyn. So the term that came in years ago, it was I'm a New Yorican. So whether I'm a New Yorican, Rochester Rican, Buffalo Rican, wherever I may be Rican, there's a line from one of my poems. I'm comfortable being who I am, and I really don't care what everyone else tries to identify me as. And we just move forward from that perspective. But it is very interesting to see how language evolves, particularly with the current term Latinx. In children's literature, Latinx is not as visible. It may be a phenomena that is forthcoming as more and more awareness of it is, but in many of the books that we have at Hippocampo, the term itself, Latinx, when talking about white Latino or Afro-Latino, is not there yet in print.
Awesome. Thanks, Henry. Thanks all of you for offering your thoughts here. So appreciate that. And again, let me throw a non-listed question out there. But again, I feel like it is important because it goes a lot to our identity. And I think, you know, we're a diverse group that has diverse identities. All right, so let's get into the formal question. So just as a review, we set an order here. So I'm just going to go through. So the order that we have is Henry, Alex, Rosa, and Stephanie. So I'll ask a question. I'll also throw it in the chat just for any of our reviews. We remember what it is. And we'll just go spotlight each of you one by one. Just a couple minutes, you know, roughly we want 3 to 4 minutes. Just kind of your thoughts responding to that question. But if anyone feels, any of our panelists feel that you want to respond to something immediately, like you can raise your hand here and we'll unmute and manage that. So hopefully it'll keep that flow of conversation going, but also, make sure our honored panelists here each get their opportunity to share their thoughts, experiences, and insights, because all of you have just such an incredible wealth of experience and knowledge that, again, we're all blessed to be learning from and hearing today. So enough of me. From here, I'm just going to ask some questions. So we'll go. All right. So our first question today, what are the problems encountered by Latinos or Latinas who move into Rochester's predominantly white suburbs, like here in Irondequoit? Do you find experiences differ based on race, ethnicity, or country of origin? So Henry, you can start. We'll give you the ball here in just a second if you don't have it already.
Okay. I'm going to try and stick with just one succinct answer instead of rambling and going all over the place. A challenge. The word problem means something, but a challenge I feel encountered by Latinos who move into Rochester's predominantly white neighborhoods are, first of all, to be able to have the income to afford the house. That means you have to have a bank account. You have wealth that permits you to buy this house in this neighborhood that you would like to live in. So that gets into the economics of it all. Once we get to another step, the economics of it all, you are now moving into a white suburb. What are the stereotypes? What are the perceptions? What has been the misinformation that your neighbors to be have been bombarded with, particularly in the last year and or in the last decade, about who you are? Thirdly, I believe that it depends on your skin tone. As a white Latinx, there's a phenomena versus a Afro-Latinx moving into the same house in the same neighborhood. It would be a totally different perception about who, what, why, where, and why you are based on that. And I think that those three particulars kept me in line to answer the question from that strand and open it up now to the rest of the panelists to go on theirs. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Henry. Alex, you're up.
Well, it's an interesting question, right? I mean, I don't want to disparage any nationality, but it is worth sharing. And, folks on the panel can disagree, but in Latin America, we come from some of the most racist countries as well, right? Your skin tone, as Henry mentioned, is a significant issue even within our own countries where we come from. So the darker you are, the more of a negative perception there is. So for a lot of us, we have not starting to experience that when we moved to the United States. But I have always joked that if I ever write a book, the title of the book is When I Was White. Because when I lived in Puerto Rico, I was considered white, but now I moved to the United States and I'm not. So imagine not only having that in a new country, but for those folks, especially those folks that may identify themselves as as Hispanics or Afro-Latinos, you know exactly what I'm talking about, which is a challenge that goes beyond just moving to the United States. So for those folks, the challenge may even be greater than the challenge that I face as a Latino or as a Hispanic. So it's not a one challenge that we all face. We all face definitely multiple challenges, even within our own culture.
Or sorry, I was muted. Thanks. Thank you very much, Alex. Rosa, your turn.
Yeah, that's definitely a question that I have to be really reflective of, because when I told you guys I came from New York City, moved up from downstate, as it's called up here. And it was very eye-opening. I had just graduated from my graduate program as a speech and language pathologist. And of course, when you want to move into a house, there was no way we were going to move in a house in Yonkers, New York. There was just not happening. Yonkers is like the suburb of the Bronx, they call it. And there's no way. It was literally like $500,000 for a house down there with like 800 square feet or something ridiculous. But we heard of Rochester. We had a lot of friends up here. And we would come up like during the holidays all the time. We're like, let's just move up there. So of course, the first obstacle or challenge, like Henry said, was money. You know, you have to go through all of these different loopholes, and it was like right after the thought we had a recession, and it wasn't a good time to be buying a house. But we're like, this is the time for us. We're ready. 2 kids and a dog and 2 adults in a tiny space is just not going to work. So it was really hard to get financing and to, you know, even know the ins and outs of all the banking issues that you have to go through to get a house. So we finally got that resolved, and then we had to, of course, have a job so we could pay for this house, beautiful house we had found. And for the first time in my life, I'd been working since I was 12. I could not get a job. You know, I had this beautiful resume, Rosa Vargas, and all awesome experience and education, and, you know, Masters of Science from Long Island University. And no, I couldn't get a job. I applied for Rochester City School District. I'm like, I would be the perfect bilingual speech pathologist for these children, for this population. No, didn't even get calls back from anywhere. So it was really disheartening, and it was really, you know, it was literally like somebody saying, you know, we don't want you. You're not what we're looking for in the suburbs of Rochester. So finally, I did get a job as an itinerant speech pathologist, going into different homes. And I worked a lot in the Rochester City area, which was actually great because I was able to really know what the needs were of this population, or the bilingual population in the Rochester City area. And, you know, what the moms had to go through. I was working with birth through 5-year-olds with speech pathology and feeding and swallowing. So it was amazing to work with these families. But I also saw the plight that they were in, you know, and I saw all the needs that they had. And I'm like, wow, how is this happening? That the Latino population in Rochester, New York has been around, has been here since, you know, Kodak time. You know, there has been a presence here for a long time. And these people don't, I mean, other than Ibero, there's no really big organization that's helping this population out at all. And it really was eye-opening. And it was very different from what I was used to in New York City, that's for sure. You know, you have nothing but resources there for us. So definitely it becomes harder when your skin tone is darker, when your last name is Vargas. Obviously, I should have put that Cronin in there, put my husband's last name on there. Maybe that would have helped. But I'm hoping that, you know, things will change, and they are changing.
Okay. Thank you for that, Rosa. All right, and Stephanie, it's your turn.
Well, I definitely agree with the other panelists and things that they have mentioned about some of the challenges that we would encounter moving into the suburbs. I am in the process of trying to find a house. I'm trying to find a house in the city. If I were to actively engage in trying to move to the suburbs, I don't think that's something that I would personally engage with. I think that some of the issues, and I'll just say from a personal experience, that I would just kind of be a little hesitant, I would say, is that, you know, my partner is Black, our son is Black, our daughter is Black, look at me, I'm Black. So we are all a family of very pigmented people. And so for us, for me personally, having a young Black son already puts me in a very different mindset, and having a Black daughter, very different mindset about where are we going to raise our children? What is going to be their environment? Is it going to be inclusive? Is it going to be diverse? Are they going to learn something? What is the neighborhood I'm trying to raise my children in? And so when I look at what could await me in the suburbs versus what could await me in the city, I have to really be conscious about where are we going to continue building our family? Where are we going to put our roots down, as they say? And it's important to be reflective of the neighborhood we're in. Is it going to be welcoming to me and my family? You know, because we're welcoming people. I mean, hello, like I'm Dominican. Like, as people of color, we just love to feed people, have a good time, welcome people to our homes, but also get to know other people. We're very much rooted in building community with other people and other families. However, just because we're like that doesn't mean we will be welcome into a neighborhood that is not like that. And, you know, a great point was made, like, I don't know what your sense of who we are is if you partner that with social media, your own personal biases. I don't want to be in an environment where my children are going to experience microaggression, racism in a way that they shouldn't be as children. And so as I look at this housing process, working through all of this and looking at houses, it's like, if there's no access to good housing, there's no access to education, there's no access to these things, we have to think differently about where do we root our family in and what things are going to be pros and cons of each neighborhood. But more importantly, is it going to be safe for my own children? I don't care where, if I'm in the city or if I'm in the suburbs. Is it going to be safe for us as a family, no matter where we are? Because that's an important thing that you have to think about, especially as communities of color. Are we going to be safe in that environment? It's sad, but that's the first question that has to come to my head. Not, can I afford this house? Can I do this? Is there a Wegmans nearby? Is there, what's nearby? You know, it's, are we going to be safe here? And that's a very sad question that we've gotten to. If the safety is the first thing you have to think about, given this day and age. But, you know, a change is coming, and today is the day.
Well, Stephanie, I'll tell you, my husband and daughter just went out. There's actually like a Biden-Harris parade going down my block here.
Tell them that as soon as we're done here, we need to go over there and join them.
We gotta do this.
Well, thank you all for those thoughts. You know, there was a diverse range of experiences, opinions, and some really powerful things that you all shared there. You know, and actually what Stephanie brought up actually flows right into our next question. So talking about our children and the challenges, what are some of the challenges that our Latino, Latina children face in our schools? And how can our schools and community work together to solve those problems? So Henry, you get to start.
Cool. All right. So my world for 26 years was a kindergarten classroom. That means that my children would walk in there and they were 4.5 to 6 years old chronologically. Developmentally, they could have been within a range of skills. In answering the question, I cannot look at it from a predominantly white world because my education and where I taught was not that reality. I taught in city schools in Rochester, New York, the poorest urban environment in this country, and we all know all the negative statistics that surround it. But when you think about the classroom, one of the most important things to consider is, who is your child's teacher? Who is that person that now will be living, co-learning with your child? 6 hours a day, 5 hours a week. Spending probably more awake time with your child than you do. That is a critically important question. And when you think about who is the teacher, one has to take a step back. Where was that teacher prepared to be a teacher? Where did they learn the skills necessary to teach my child? What did they learn about curriculum that pertains to my child's existence? Where did they learn about the competencies that are necessary to meet my child? Not only did they learn it, but did they synthesize it and make it part of their pedagogy? Are they pedagogically sound to teach my child? And then we can, take off from there. What is the curriculum they're using? The standards-based approach, is it testing? Is it teaching to the test? I can rattle off for an hour what are all the things, but it starts from who is your teacher? How did they come to be your child's teacher? And what is the relationship intergrade levels, moving up your school? Who will be your child's teacher in first grade, in second, and third, and fourth, and so on? So from an early childhood perspective, my area of expertise, I believe one of the greatest concerns should be, who is going to be my child's teacher? And I'll let everyone elaborate on all the milieu of things that we can talk about, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Henry. Alex, your turn.
Yeah, when I first moved to Rochester, this whole city and suburb, different identities, I was not familiar or aware of. So for me, say moving to Rochester was just Rochester. As life went on, that baggage became part of my baggage, right? Because now we learn city versus suburbs. There's something there, but it's not something that it was in my mind when we first looked for a house. So out of coincidence, we ended up landing in Brighton, where my daughter spent all her school years in Brighton. It was a great school district. There were some challenges. Brighton tends to be one of the most somewhat diverse suburban school districts. Not so much, but we had the issues. We had to have the conversation with our daughter. So we found some difficulties that I don't think all the parents had to be concerned with. So instead of talking about school and studying, we had to have this additional conversation, which takes away time from all the other conversations. But overall, I have to say that we found a very friendly community. To this date, my daughter is 26, graduated from UB, has a great job. Decided to stay in Rochester out of all the other opportunities she has, and she still has some, many of the friends that she had when she was coming up in school from first grade, second grade, third grade. So if I had to say, going to Henry's, I think overall we had issues with probably one or two teachers in 12 years that I could point out that there were some feelings that she was being treated differently. But we were able to manage them successfully. And I have to say, the support from the other parents of her friends, that her friends, go home and tell her parents what went on in school. It was somewhat of an overall good experience. But I have to say this, it was because of the conversations that we had as parents and the expectations that we put on our kids. We were able to transcend a lot of that racial or ethnicity conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And Rosa.
All right. This is a really interesting topic for me because I work with the Latino, Latinx population at Rochester City School District as a bilingual speech pathologist, and it's very hard for them in the same way as it is for our Black and brown people. It's the poverty, of course. I always keep telling people when it comes to Rochester City, it's the poverty. And if kids are worried about when their next meal is going to be, they're not going to be worrying about schoolwork or learning. So that's a really big problem in that district. And then of course our bilingual students have to deal with, and like Henry said, who are the teachers? You know, it's very important for bilingual students to have teachers that speak their language. It's so frustrating every year in kindergarten when our new kindergartners come in. Their language is very confused because at home they have all Spanish at home, and then they come to school in pre-K and they are with their English speaking teachers, and if they get, you know, special ed services, all their services are in English. And every day it's me fighting against this because they're doing a disservice for our students. They need their services to be provided in their language so they could progress, so they could become better at, you know, at whatever difficulty or whatever disorder, whatever distress it is that they're working with. So I'm constantly, and of course it always comes back to there's not enough professionals that are bilingual, you know. When I started in Rochester City School District, there were three, I was the third bilingual speech and language pathologist in a district that I don't even want to tell you how many students it has. But in my school alone, there's 305 students that are special ed and are bilingual students. So it's a constant struggle. It's really hard for me. I remember when our kids came to Irondequoit, you know, Gael, you know, is a little darker. So he always got the aggressive boy title as soon as he got to any class, which was always hard. But I have to say, we moved to this area because of the school district, and the teachers have been really good with working with my son and with everything else that comes with being a brown boy. But it would be amazing if they had more teachers of color in every school district. I mean, up here, that's definitely where we're lacking. So I'm in there. I'm trying to. I'm constantly mentoring kids from Nazareth and have one from Fredonia this year. So I'm constantly trying to mentor new teachers and new speech pathologists of color to just stick with it and you know, be that change that our students really need.
Hey, thank you, Rosa. Stephanie, your turn.
This is a loaded question for me because I've had quite an experience this year with the district, given COVID, given what the expectations of our students have been this year, and also access to a Chromebook, access to learning about what do you do on a Chromebook, because I think that some of the challenges that all of our children has faced, especially our Latino children, that there's not enough people in the district who speak our language, who can teach our families about the process, the policies, the rules of engagement when it even comes to learning online, you know? And all of the instructions that have been provided have been in English. That doesn't help a bilingual family, especially when the only one who really speaks English is probably the child. So you can have, you know, a 9-year-old being an interpreter for a family, you know? And so I think some of the other challenges, like, I completely agree. We don't have enough teachers of color teaching our children of color. That's something for me is extremely important, because as someone who didn't see their first person of color until high school, it was almost like I didn't realize that was an opportunity for me as a young person. So that's a problem. The deeper issue is, you know, institutional racism also includes what books are we giving our children to learn from? They are not written from a lens of people of color. 99.9% of them are written by white males from a white lens. And when it comes to our history, we are either one chapter, one paragraph, and it is described as if we should be these thankful people, that these people came to save our people. And so from early on, our kids are thinking we have been a saved people from these other people. One, it is obviously not the fact. So I think it is important to make sure that as we're looking at curriculum and we're looking at providing access to these teachers to be teaching our children, I need you to either learn about the experience firsthand, talk to me as a parent about how you should be approaching my child of color. I need you to also stand very comfortably in your privilege and saying, I don't know this. I'm not comfortable doing this, right? Because there's a lot of incentive programs out there for these teachers to come and teach in our district. You don't live in the district. You don't have friends of color. You've never been around people of color. You've never been to an event focused on people of color. You haven't been to a march, a demonstration, a protest, La Marqueta, the public market. You have not been on this side of our world. But here's an opportunity for you to come and teach my child. I have an issue with that. Because now you do not know how to connect with my child. And now my child, who is, he's 4 years old, he's a Black boy. He's already, before he even opens his mouth, people are gonna assume now that he's gonna be a problem child because they see his skin as a weapon already. It's gonna be a problem just because of who he is, right? So when we look at especially our young men of color who are always at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to access, when it comes to ensuring that what resources do they need? All of our children are suffering at some point through mental health crisis. And they believe that if my son has some sort of outburst, well, he must have something. No, he's frustrated because he's hungry, as an example. Because also, even food access in the city school district, look at the meals that they get. None of this is cultural food. A child can eat applesauce only so many days, okay? So down to who is teaching my child, what books are you giving him to read? What food are you giving him? All these things gives and lends itself to the success of the child, or the lack of success as well. So we have to be conscious that it's a multi-pronged approach with the issues our children are going through in the district, no matter what district it is. So if we're talking about the education system in the suburbs, there needs to be more celebration of diversity and inclusion. There needs to be more talk about white privilege. There needs to be more talk about stepping outside of your comfort zone. Besides, your home and your neighborhood, there's a whole other galaxy out there, a whole other world that you're not even giving our white students access to. They're missing out just as much as our kids of color. And so we have to ensure that as we're putting our children in whatever school, our parents, anybody out there with parents, with children and connected to other people, do not be scared to be an advocate for our children, no matter what district they're in. Because if you don't say something, somebody's going to speak on your behalf, and it's probably going to be the wrong story. And so I always heard these stories before I got my son into school. And now that I'm like immersed in it and really seeing it firsthand, I'm like, listen, y'all don't make me be the crazy Latina, but if I have to, I bring the Dominican out of me. Don't play with me about my babies. We don't do that. And so even as a parent, it's like you try really hard to ensure that I'm very specific about the needs of my child. I am not here to cause a problem. I'm not here to tell you I'm complaining. I'm here to bring you solutions, and I'm here to bring you resources. Now, either you fix the problem or I'm gonna fix you. And that's what I'm gonna leave it at. It's like, listen, don't keep mentioning y'all from New York City. We were transplanted here from Manhattan, New York, and Washington Heights. So y'all don't want to play with me out here. Don't play with me out here about my babies. So advocate when you can, and don't be scared to, and don't be shy to, because I think as a lot of parents of color are always just so scared to just say something because they don't want to be deemed like, well, see, them again. Yep, it sure is me again. Here I am. Now, what do we do? What are we going to do about this problem? Let's work together to do that, right? Parents should be working with the schools. Schools should be working with the community. Engage different community organizations to come and help you do the work that's needed to be done so that our children can be successful. They can understand their identity and explore that, but also not be tokenized no matter what school they go to, in terms of, ask Alejandro, he knows about all of that. Why don't you know about it too? So education from all over.
It's incredible, all of you. Thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. I won't add too much of myself in here, but I kind of had some of the the other side of that experience where, me as a 22-year-old boy went down to East Harlem and taught. And, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm half Puerto Rican. Like, this is going to be awesome. Like, I grew up in the country and, I really had no exposure to like Puerto Rican culture, right? It was kind of like what I invented, which back in the 90s wasn't really easy to do, right? Because we didn't really have the internet. And I remember going down there and I had, like, I think to what all of you have talked about a little bit is that it was a really eye-opening experience. Like, I thought I knew. And once I got there and had, I remember regularly, like I made best friends with the Spanish teacher because, none of my, not none, but a lot of my parents didn't speak any English. And right, I didn't want the kids translating. I wanted to be able to talk that, and I kind of went through, also learned like, well, high school Spanish doesn't really doesn't prepare you to have meaningful engagements with your parents, right? And again, not that I want to like throw myself in the middle of here at all. We'll move on to the next question. But, for me as a young teacher at the time, it was very eye-opening to realize like, and now as I look back now as a much older man, looking back like, wow, the power you have, I don't know if power is the right word for it, but the impact that you have in those spaces as that teacher, especially as a white teacher, like when you're interfacing with them, like the damage that you can cause, it's something like we need to be aware of, like from all sides of that. So I thank you all, man, impactful stuff. So I'll shut up. Let's get on to the next question so we can hear more of this.
I do want to add this, Michael, is that you made a very good point. You recognize what your experience would have meant to other students and what your experience could mean for another teacher. And I think the more we start to circle back to the same kinds of people that impacted us, in your case, Michael, it's like, this is what I learned as a teacher. Michael should be out there connected to other young up and coming people that want to be teachers and say, listen, this is the reality of this world.
Mm-hmm.
If ready for this kind of conversation or this kind of other side of the work besides the work, you're wrong line of work. If you ain't ready for the work, you better find something else to do.
Amen.
Do that, because I think sometimes that kind of conversation needs to happen for people that want to be involved in teaching of others, no matter if it's in the education system, through speech, through art, through music, through whatever. It's important to also talk about the reality of who are you serving? You're not just working for people. You have to work with people and take people where they're at.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. All right, let me move on to the next question. All right, next. Are you aware of problems involving the Latinx community here and the police in the city of the Rochester or surrounding suburbs? And do you have any suggestions for, how do we deal with problems with our Latino community and RPD, IPD, any of the other PDs? So Henry, you first.
I'll take it into a realm of invisibility so that the other panelists can talk about perhaps the realm of visibility. All police departments are using technology to prepare them for whatever situation they've encountered. The technology is such that it's a database that they know if they are going to the corner of Clinton and Clifford, there's an entire database that has been accumulated of what have been the incidents of police intervention on the corner of Clinton and Clifford. It could be in the Bronx, 138th and Longwood Avenue, a block from where I grew up. And they would know from the last 20 years, because the databases have been pumping out the data, driven by algorithms. Those algorithms are intuitive already. They are communicating intra and inter police districts, sharing the information that they have, so that we are then relegated to not being a human, but to being an incident, a contact point in this metric world. The Association of Mathematicians decided to boycott all of this operation because they felt that the algorithms themselves are racist, biased, and totally culturally incompetent with the reality of the situation that any police person is going to encounter. So how do you change that? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. This is an industry that has lobbyists arguing for it and its expansion everywhere. We have to dismantle this from a policy perspective because it is virtually invisible. That's what I meant. This is an invisible aspect of the relationship between law enforcement and our people, whether you're in the city or in the suburbs. I'll stop there because I know that any one of us can talk about so much about the visible aspect of it, but that's my take.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. Alex, you're up.
From a personal perspective, I've been pulled over more times than anybody will want to, but I have to admit, other than in the town of Greece, everywhere else I've had positive experience. I lived briefly in Greece, and in the brief time that I was there, I think I got pulled over 3 times for never got a ticket for I don't know what kind of reason. So I kind of felt that that was not going to be the place for me. But let's realize one of the national tactics that police department use is in order to prevent crimes in certain areas, they kind of push it all into a certain location. And that tends to be in the city of Rochester. And we keep saying Clinton and Clifford is one of those areas. So you may find that as part of policing strategy will increase the encounter of stopping or questioning individuals or minority groups, but that is by default as well because that's what lives in the area, right? I also have to say I have fraternity brothers and personal friends that are police officers. So it's very difficult to pinpoint to a specific department, but understanding that overall strategy, policing is built on a system that will identify certain individuals more than others. As a matter, and they could be said that it's based on statistics, but statistics feed themselves, right? So if you arrest more black and brown people, then next year you can say, well, our statistics show that black and brown people cause most of the crimes. Well, when your policing strategy is based on that, of course, that's going to happen. So yeah, I think there's a big element of structural racism when it comes to policing and training police officers. And I personally have not faced that, but I know many family members and friends and children of friends who faced it.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. Rosa, you're up.
Okay. Another loaded question. Who's loaded all these loaded questions today? It's interesting. Like I didn't really think that there was a Latino or problem in when it came to the Rochester or the Monroe County policing, I guess. Until I told a friend of mine who, a really good friend of ours, were like, oh, we're moving to Rondequoit, you guys have to come visit. And he's like, well, I still don't have my papers in order. He's from Mexico. So, I don't want to go up there because of Border Patrol. And I'm like, what? Border Patrol? What is that? So of course, when I came up here, I found out what Border Patrol was. Gave me a couple tickets. I always, when we were driving up here, never got out of tickets ever in my life. I don't know how some women do, but oh, try not to take it personal. But yeah, definitely it's always been a negative spotlight that I've seen when it comes to policing and the Latinx community. When we first moved here, I remember I heard of the Puerto Rican parade happening, and I'm like, oh, finally a parade. I haven't seen a parade in so long. I'm so excited. So we went and we participated and ate some good empanadas, and we were so happy. And of course, then at the end, you know, towards the nighttime, there's a lot of festivities, and you want to be part of that because that's when the fun happens. And that's my first time when we were encountered with Rochester City Police, and it was not nice. You know, I had my kids with me and my husband, and you know, it was definitely aggressive, and they were not happy that we were, you know, or I don't know, not even organizing. We were partying, really. It was a big block party, and it was, you know, celebration of Puerto Rican culture. And yeah, there goes that celebration of Biden and Harris still. There's little caravans going in my neighborhood. So happy. But yes, it's negative. It's definitely, you know, we are a part of also that systemic racism that the police has implemented on us, unfortunately. And it's going to be a struggle, even with, you know, Biden Harris. I want us to keep working towards dismantling, as much as they don't like to hear it, of the police, because it's not working. Like, I was listening the other day of how many arrests they actually make of I'm sorry. Of how many arrests they actually make, and it's ridiculous. They're not doing their jobs. They're just targeting us because of whatever systemic agenda they have, and it's really time for it to change. And I'm really hopeful that with this presidency and vice presidency that change will start happening for the better.
Okay, thanks, Rosa. Stephanie?
No, these questions, man, let me tell you, they're great questions, right? And I'll say this, when we're talking about whoever is in the service of serving the community, understand the community that you're serving in. Your responsibility when you took on these positions are to serve the community. Stand proud in that, but also stand proud in that you have to learn about who you're serving. You cannot, and I say this for any organization, I can't be good enough to recruit, but not good enough to save when I need you. So let's be clear about that first and foremost. You want to raise the numbers of the number of people of color within your departments, but you don't want to learn about us. You don't want to save us in a way that will help all of us as a community keep coming together. Okay? So when we're talking about multicultural competency, you either got it or you don't. It's really that simple. There needs to be more evaluation when you're talking about serving the community, whether it's RPD or otherwise. We cannot continue to police out of fear. We must police from understanding to helping other people. That is the responsibility that we take. For us as a community is to ensure that we're also holding all of each other accountable, to ensure that we are doing the best that we can in our community to provide a safe environment, so that if something happens and we do call the police, that it is not out of engagement of fear, but an engagement of helping the situation, in de-escalating a situation. And so it's important to understand that whether you're in the suburbs or in the city, it's just important to understand who you're serving, where are you serving? And again, it just goes back to the teachers. There's a lot of incentives for you to work in our cities and our communities, but you don't got to live here. I have a little bit of an issue with that. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. But it's important for me to understand, for other people to understand, when you're when you're being of service to our community, understand the community, understand the issues. We have poverty going on. We have lack of access to success through education. We have so many issues going on in the city. Learn about those things. It's not just about that, oh, people don't want to work. There's no jobs for people, right? Understand who is in the community. Ask the kid on the block, why are you always on the block, man? Like, what's going on? Get to know the people. But again, I just have to go back to what I started with. We can't be good enough to recruit, but we're not good enough to save. Understand the mental health issues that may be impacting a community. Food insecurity, education, jobs. I mean, the list is endless. So learn about it, serve the community. And I also share this, goes back to, if you're in it, right? Let's learn about it together. Be more in the community, not so when something happens, go hang out with the kids, get to know the neighbors, get to know, so when they see you, it's not like, oh my gosh, this is a child right now is thinking when they see a police officer at 8-10 years old to be already in fear of the police. Something has to change so that a child doesn't feel like, an 8-year-old child shouldn't have to feel fear when they see a police officer. So it's important to, going back to the training. But one of the things I also say, you can't train on empathy, you can't train on sympathy, and you certainly can't train on competence, because either you got it or you don't. And then that's really what it comes down to, is that kind of opportunity. So you could train all you want, but there's nothing like real world experience. Again, going back to partnering with community organizations, partnering with the schools, that partnership and collaboration across departments and organizations is so vital, so that you can move a community forward, which moves your world a little bit better. Somebody got to do the work, but it ain't always going to be on us as the people.
Truth. Thank you, Stephanie. That was great. All of you, that was fantastic. All right, let me move on to the next question. Hopefully this will be another fun one. What is your perception of the relationship between the Latinx community and the Black Lives Matter movement? How does anti-Black racism or colorism within the Latino community influence this community's response to Black Lives Matter? So, Henry, you get to start.
Okay, I consider that a part A and a part B. I'll start with part A. For me, the relationship between the current Black Lives Movement and the Latinx community has a long history. It didn't start today because of this moment. It predates the founding of this country. Did you know that there were Haitian and Cuban troops in the Civil War supporting what was going on here? Did you know that Du Bois and other incredible intellectuals, Frederick Douglass, Tubman, all of them had concurrent sessions with Latinx people in major presentations that they did, were they in Philadelphia, in Baltimore, in New York? There's a long history of a connection. For me, most poignantly is when I was a member of the Young Lords Party, and we were working hand in hand with the Black Panther Party. That fusion of the Young Lords and the Black Panthers was something that created terror in the eyes of the white establishment. Terror. Therefore, we were destroyed by COINTELPRO, destroyed by organized, the CIA, the FBI, double agents, et cetera, an attempt to destroy what we were doing. That is my most personal moment of understanding what is going on today with Black Lives Matter. Today with Black Lives Matter is like a renaissance, a refreshing explosion of young people and what they are desiring. And we need to support them, but let them know that there's a history of struggle that has been there to where we are now. And we need to support them as the leaders, not put up me as an elder to stand in a protest. No, they are the leaders. I support them. Yes, I am an elder. I bring a lot of stuff I can teach you, but you teach me now, because it's time for you to take over and move this thing forward. And I will go down with you if I have to, but we got to get there. We got to get there, It's moving in that direction. And as we used to say, you know, pa'lante. Pa'lante meant forward. Vaya.
Wow, thank you. And I'm glad you brought up Young Lords because I feel like that's part of history that we don't hear about as much. But yeah, thank you for bringing that in. Let me move on to Alex. You're up.
You know, much like Harry said again, I mean, the folks of my generation, we were robbed of the ability to get ourselves involved in this. And by rob, what I mean is we were too busy in the 80s and 90s with a lot of entertainment. I mean, all the same issues always existed. But, you know, we did not learn about them, right? We were focused on MTV and you know, clothes and hairs and all that stuff. So I think it's wonderful to see these young folks going to the streets and advocating for themselves in a way that perhaps my generation didn't do. So much like Henry, you know, we usually get asked to get involved. And my answer is, I'll get involved if you tell me what to do. This is your movement. I cannot match your energy. Your desire for this is, it is very legitimate, and to the point where I rather serve as an assistant to you, regardless of what my position is. I may be able to bring resources, but like Henry said, I'm energized by a lot of that activity. I think it's a conversation that this country should have had many years ago. I hope that we don't go back and feel a sense of comfort to believe that this problem is done. So, you know, I'm a strong supporter of all the activities that are taking place. I see it critical, right? I mean, it's one of those things that we sometimes, as a minority group, we cannot expect for things to get better for us without getting better for somebody else. So we all have to have the same conversation. And right now, with the amount of energy and attention that is being paid, I think you know, it's good for us to be involved in a way that just provides the support for those folks in any way that they may need us.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Rosa.
Okay. So I agree overall, definitely. The young Latinx community has really been carrying the Black Lives Matter movement, like in the forefront, I think, of a lot of the activism and work that they've been doing, especially coming out of Florida after, you know, the school massacres that happened there. I feel like we got a lot of great activism coming from Florida for Black Lives Matter, and it's a little disheartening again because the enthusiasm, I feel like it hasn't been there for a lot of my counterparts, like so people in their 40s, 50s. And my parents' counterparts, I feel like, you know, when they hear Black Lives Matter, I don't know if it's more of a misinformation. So I'm constantly trying to inform people about what it means and what the organization is, and that it is a civil rights movement. And it's actually the biggest civil rights movement we've had, Black Lives Matter, since Martin Luther King. So it's such an amazing, and you know, I feel like it really doesn't get the press and the acknowledgement as it should in the press because of, you know, the leadership that we've had and his misinformation about the movement. But I'm constantly, you know, trying to bring those older Latinx people into the conversation because, you know, I do feel like it goes back to that systemic racism, like Henry and I think Alex mentioned. It is embedded in our culture as well. You know, we were colonized by the Spaniards, and they made it very, you know, they killed off all our Native people, and the genocide and everything that came with that is, I think, how our development of the Latino people came about. You know, those are that's our history. That's where we came from. So, you know, those negative connotations to people of color or people like us that are Latino and have the pigment, it's a little bit more, I think, and I see it, you know, it's hard to hide when people that look like me are still supporting, you know, Trump or, you know, Republican ideals or ideals that do not support people of color or Black Lives Matter agenda. So I'm in it. I'm in the fight. I'm gonna keep fighting. I keep hearing these numbers about, you know, Hispanic males. A lot of them voting for Trump and Black males, but I don't know. I need to like really see it to believe it, because I don't. It's not good for the development and for the betterment of our people, for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Rosa. Stephanie, it's your turn.
So what I have seen is an identity crisis amongst not all, some white Latinos who do not understand their indigenous roots or where our people have come from. I also have seen that our white Latinos who do want to be involved don't know how to do that, or how to be an advocate and don't know how to do that. There is a mix amongst everybody in the Latino community, really, who either don't feel that they have a space in the BLM movement or they don't know how to be involved. Just like anybody, you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to be perceived the wrong way, you don't know what to do, right? When you're thinking about allyship and how complicated that can be, you can be an advocate and an ally without occupying space. You should not be at the front of the lines, as they say. You could be on the sidelines, you could be in the back line, donate money to these organizations, pick up and read a book and learn about it. But I think that within our community, especially, there's an identity crisis among white Hispanics who don't understand that just because you are perceived one way doesn't mean you're not going to be treated the other way, right? And so I think the misunderstanding of understanding who you are and who you are not, there's a lot of people struggling with that. And I think even if you look within our Latino community, when you talk about colorism, that's very evident in our community, especially here in Rochester. And so we have to be very conscious about the colorism and the anti-Blackness that we have within our own communities first, right? So don't try to go and fix somebody else's house when your house is a mess, okay? Right? Rule of thumb, as we know in our communities, tú no sales de esta casa si está sucia. You're not gonna leave your house if it's dirty and go to your friend's house. No, you got work to do here. We need to do that work within our community first. And while we're doing that and educating ourselves on how to be better to other people in our own community, no, don't be out here trying to front like you down for Black Lives Matter when I know you're not, or you're not ready to actually be, right? Everybody likes to have this, you know, as they call it, Facebook allyship. Like, I shared a post, like, come on, I'm down for the people. And it's like, that's nice, but there's more work to be done. And so until our community can do some work inside, yes, donate money, show up, bring food, give people a ride, read a book, create a book club, do whatever you need to do to learn about how our people as Latinos, as Afro-Latinos in this movement, and how white Hispanics in this movement, where can you purposefully occupy space but not take over? It's important for you to know your role in the BLM movement as an Afro-Latino, as a Latino, and other Black people as well may not know either. You know, it's if you don't know about Black Lives Matter, I encourage you to please go to their website and read what they're actually about. There's so much misinformation about there because of social media and because of people's own bias, and our current administration, who's leaving soon, thank God. It's just important for everyone to realize that we can support a movement and also fix our own community at the same time. But we have to be realistic in what our expectations are for our community, and realistic about how are we going to support other communities as well. Because as communities of color, we should be showing up to everything together, because we're oppressed. This is not the oppression Olympics, right? We're not gonna keep going back and forth about, well, this happened to me. Well, that's nothing compared to what happened to me. We are all being oppressed. If we continue to be separate always under the guise that separate is equal, which it is not, we need to continue being siloed as communities of color, especially as Latinos within our own communities. And so whether you're talking about women's rights, LGBTQ rights, people of color, disability, so on and so forth, as oppressed communities, we should be showing up for each other, but we should not be occupying the spaces that the people who are in those communities should be occupying as well. So read a book, donate to these organizations, learn and understand the purpose behind the movement and the people behind the movement. But also check yourself before you wreck yourself at these movements, and then somebody got to call you out talking about, why are you occupying the space in this movement? Know your role, know your lane, and support. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Stephanie. I think just for me, that's some of my experience too, that a few of you talked about, that identity piece that I kind of talked about before in my experience in going down to New York, and just being involved in different things. Like I took me a lot longer than I want to admit, but well into my 30s before I realized that just because I know that my biological father's Puerto Rican doesn't give me a free pass on these issues. But I realized that subconsciously I lived a lot of my life giving myself that pass, right? And it wasn't until, for me, like that's a lot of my motivation for being involved with the race, because I realize, oh, I've operated under this pompous attitude, really, that I'm like, wow, this racism isn't a problem for me because I'm Puerto Rican. And not thinking about like, well, not everybody who sees me knows my life story, and it doesn't mean I'm not afforded privileges. So, there's been a lot of self-actualization, but then just as, all of you said, it's realizing like, no, I can't, like, that doesn't give me a pass to not be involved. Like, I have to, but in a way that makes sense, because recognize that, me, I'm white Latino, like I am white, and there's a weight that carries with it. And, even with the best intentions, like I frequently say, the best intentions are not good enough. So anyways, I'll stop there. But totally agree with you.
Thank you for saying that, Michael. I think it's so important for more people to just say that out loud.
Agreed.
I have afforded myself a privilege I didn't even know I had.
Right.
You know how impactful that is, just for someone to just step into this privilege, lean into the discomfort of saying that out loud in a room full of people that you already know they're looking at you a certain way anyway.
Right.
When you stand in that is what it begins to open doors to better conversations about, okay, you know what you've been carrying your whole life.
Right.
Great. Acknowledgement done. Great. Now what? Now we can get to work.
Right.
Because people start to function under the illusion like, I've never experienced that in my whole life. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, what? Okay. But I'm glad that you said that, Michael. And I think that's so important. And that's just an example of what, if more people just did that, all people just stood and say, I don't know about this. There's a great picture that's always popping up out of nowhere. It was during the Black Lives Matter movement, and I don't know where this particular demonstration took place, but it was an old white lady, and she had a sign up and it said, sorry I'm late, I was learning. That was her sign. And that alone, as corny as it may sound, that is impactful, for just people to say, I'm sorry, I don't know, but I want to learn.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Stephanie. All right. I want to do just one more question for us. And I do want to give at least a couple for the rest of the group if other people want to talk. So let's see. Our last question for us as a panel right now. What is the impact of the current and soon to be former administration's policies and rhetoric on immigration as you as an individual and the larger Latino community? And I would just like to emphasize again, former, soon to be former administration. So Henry, you're up.
As the conversation evolves, what's coming to me are some of the refranes my mother would use with me. Refranes are little, in Japanese, they call them koans, little bits of wisdom that we use. And one of them is the classic one, you know, camarón que se duerme se lo lleva la corriente. You know, if you're a shrimp and you fall asleep, the current is going to just swipe you away. Wake up, right? Another one is, dime con quién andas, y te digo quién tú eres. Tell me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are. And there's hundreds of these. They're part of the bomba tradition and beautiful. But I'm thinking about that because that's part of my genetic memory. So having our genetic memory be revitalized is an important thing to experience and, like Stephanie says, acknowledge and jump into it and deal with it because it's part of the reality and we have to move forward from it. In relationship to the question, the impact of the current administration came out in a statistic that was shared by my partner, Pamela, a day or two ago. 48% of Monroe County voted for this TP duo. 48% voted for the TP duo. I don't even want to say their names. TP, yo, toilet paper, there we go. We got a mnemonic for this. Anyway, that's it. That's very interesting, right? Monroe County, 48% voted for this duo. So they voted for them because they believe in everything that they stand for. In the context of the question, policies and rhetoric on immigration, they believe in that. First of all, Latinos are not a monolithic entity. What Latinos in Florida did is an anomaly when you think about the larger LatinX community of the entire country. It's an anomaly. 48%, you know, 48% go with all the semantic vomit that we heard for 3 years going on 4, spewed by this dude and his little chingao on his side. There's something wrong with that. You know, Monroe County, someone said that one of the most powerful questions you can ask someone is, who do you think your neighbor will vote for? Because they'll probably have a Freudian slip and identify who they would vote for within the answer to that question. In this idea of knowing who your allies are, like Stephanie says, or like all the other sisters and brothers here are saying, I had a wake-up call. So in answering that question, his rhetoric, their rhetoric, permeated 70-some million people in this country to the point where they cast their vote for this particular ideology. Folks, this is the tip of an iceberg. That's all we're seeing. Yo, man, all we gotta do is dig down a little bit and it's gonna get uglier and uglier and uglier. And I'll leave it there because again, it's been said, all these questions are loaded and we can go off with this. This could be a weekend retreat and we wouldn't get over all the stuff we gotta say. So I'll stop there.
Oh, amen to that. All right, let's move on. Alex, your turn.
I mean, I know there's a lot of excitement because of the news we just heard. I just want to, remind ourselves, right? As Henry was saying, camarón que se duerme, you know, why are we still talking about this? Right? Why is this still, this is not a political issue. This is an American issue. And at the end of the day, it becomes an economic issue. So, you know, yes, the last 4 years, we know the challenges and the horror of the last 4 years. But before that, we had 8 years. How come that was not solved when we had 8 years? Why do we think that this next 4 years is going to be any different? We got to realize this is all part of a system, right? That goes beyond your well-being and my well-being. And the system depends on keeping certain issues alive to be able to have a narrative to continue to bring in people. So what is the incentive for this issue to be resolved? I still don't know politically. What is the incentive for the issue to be resolved? And that's one of the challenges where again, I said, we're being optimistic and we should be optimistic, but I still don't see many incentives for either party to resolve a lot of the issues that we're actually even currently talking about. So I'll be optimistic today, and then I'll go back to my optimism, my pessimism, after I have a few drinks later on. But that's where I am with it.
Alex.
Amen to that. Yeah, go ahead, Rosa.
Yes. Oh, that's a really, especially now, 48%. Wow. I knew. I mean, all you have to do is kind of walk around our neighborhood in Irondequoit, and you see the flags and the banners, the Trump banners. And one thing I tried to do with my Facebook account this week was, like, between Tuesday and today, was kind of see what, try to start a conversation with my Republican neighbors. I really did want to know, like, what about Trump's agenda did you want to vote for? What about his ideals really drew you to vote for him? What about Biden's ideals didn't put you off and made you say, no, I'm a Republican, I'm gonna just say Republican? Because I know I have a lot of friends that were Republicans and they changed their vote to Democrat this year. So it has been something that you do have to take in, and you experience it. I've experienced it where I live. The I guess racism, you have to say it, right? I mean, I've tried so hard to not say if you're a Trump supporter, you're racist, but I'm sorry, if you are okay with his ideals and the things that the administration, I say he, but Pence and all the other Republicans are right there with him. If you agree with all his ideals, then we may have a problem. Then we have something to talk about. And I've been trying to make it like, okay, let's talk about it. I want to make this a forum, where we could talk about it, because now, okay, Biden and Harris have won, but we need to keep talking about this.
If I can add something, I often want to say those were not Trump's and Pence's ideas. Those have been always American ideas. So they did not come up 4 years ago and introduce this. It's just that's how people always felt. And then they finally found someone who was able to voice how they face. So he was just a conduit to that, for that behavior to be okay, right? But it's scary, like you said, that in this election nationally, after 4 years in a pandemic, only a 5 million vote difference. So what does that say? That says, and I have this conversation, and I actually, although I completely disagree with where a lot of the with the Republicans supporting Trump, I completely understand it, because these folks are the children of children who have been taught over time through school, through grandparents, through neighbors, through friends, through parents, that they are the hero of the story. right? They are the savior of the story. As a result, there is a feeling of superiority over this. So when I give you an example, you know, if somebody was living in a trailer in a mobile home, you know, this came up in a conversation. They say, how can that person living in a mobile home vote for Trump? Guess what? They were living in a mobile home when Obama was elected president. And perhaps their life got just marginally better. But for them, the feeling of being superior and feeling better than everybody else is worth more than that marginal benefit that they might have otherwise gotten. So I understand that a lot of their decisions is because of lack of education. And, you know, they're seeing prominent figures, prominent non-white figures rising to certain levels of success despite the racism, despite the structural racism, and yet they are seeing themselves as inferior. So when someone comes along and says, you know what, I'm not going to give you anything better, but the only thing that I'm going to give you is your sense of superiority, people like that. That's a heck of a security blanket for a lot of folks. So that's why they vote for it, because it gives them that sense of, at least it makes me feel like I'm still in charge, like I'm still part of the elite group. So, you know, it's one of those, you know, Trump didn't bring this into this country. This country has been like this. And this is a great time to hold the mirror to ourselves and see that after all, forget about the race stuff for a minute. The pandemic, just the pandemic alone. And for someone to be able to get that many votes, it has to be something beyond just believing in one person. There has to be something integral in all those folks that rely and need that sense of security.
Yeah, I think there is something that a deep soul searching that we need to do beyond just interviewing people in diners from Iowa for the next 4 years, right? All right, but I won't say any more. Stephanie, want to hear your thoughts here.
Hey, honey, I'm sorry, Michael. I just wanted to say real quick that absolutely our lives are shaped by our experiences. And that's what I was talking about before. I wanted to get people that voted for Trump, I wanted to hear their experiences, because just like my experiences have shaped who I am, very much so. I want to know what experiences they've had that have shaped their ideology, because, you know, we have to live with these people for the next 4 years. We have to build a bridge, you know, whether we like it or not, to people that voted for Trump and people who don't really see eye to eye with our ideals and have been advanced and have been, you know, have gotten all these things, all these gifts and presents for being the way they are, for being white supremacists or racist or whatever you want to call it. But they don't want the status quo to change. I do want the status quo to change because it's not benefiting me or any of the people that I know in my community. So I definitely want to have that conversation, you know, even if I'm not going to change their minds, I want them to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere and my community is not going anywhere, and we have to work on this together.
Yeah, the purpose of the conversations is not to try to convert each other. Is let me understand where you're coming from and let you understand where I'm coming from. We're neighbors, right? If something happens on our street, we're going to throw everything out and we're going to focus on ourselves. So let's not try to convert each other. I just want to know what your thought process is, and I want you to know what my thought process is, and let's agree to disagree, but at least know where each of us are coming from.
I think another aspect to contemplate is the fact that we're talking the political sphere of influence. And I truly believe that this is a problem of class and capitalism as well. That's maybe food for future thought and analysis, but that's all I'm going to say right now.
All right.
I'll just share this. When it's hard for me to hear we can agree to disagree when what you want to agree on is the success of my oppression. It is hard for me to listen to someone who, at the end of the day, you want the status quo to stay as it is for your benefit and to the detriment of mine. I can't have conversations that are rooted in that. It's hard for me to be an active listener because as an active listener, you have to listen to understand, not listen to reply. And I think that when we talk about this administration's rhetoric, and yes, he was a poster boy for, if you were to put a poster children together for what America is and what it is rooted in and what is it representative, boom, there you go. That was the current and soon to be former administration. It wasn't anything different that was from one presidency to the next. I can agree with that. What is hard for me to agree on is, no, I don't want to have a conversation with you because at the end of the day, you just want things to change. You want to keep your privilege as this really warm, delicious mink coat that you have, okay? It is so comfortable for you. It is familiar. It is your best friend. It is your best ally. It is your castle. It is everything down to on a cellular, molecular level. You love this privilege and you want to keep it by any means necessary. But as a people, we have to challenge that by any means necessary as well. We cannot continue to think that it is okay to, we don't have that privilege as people of color, okay? I can't walk around here and say, well, I believe this because that's just the way things need to be. It's no real human being should be so comfortable in their privilege that it is rooted in the oppression of other people. That is my main issue with things. You know, I'm okay with having a difference of opinion, but no, we're not going to agree to disagree because at the end of the day, you're agreeing to the success of my oppression. Period. Now, who would agree to that? Now, be realistic. Have some inner thoughts, you know? Have a conversation with other people. Tell me something. Don't spew the story that you want me to hear. Tell me the reality. I appreciate everyone who is a supporter of them. You want to know why? Because I know where you stand. You can call it whatever you want. You could be a capitalist, it could be racism, whatever you want. It is super clear why you would want things to stay the way they are. And I appreciate that because you know what, at least it's honest, right? At least you're telling me you don't like people of color. I appreciate your honesty. I know where you stand. You know where I stand. And then I know we will never stand together. You will never be on my front lines. I will never be on yours. Está bien. Tato, no hay problema. That's fine with me. Ya yo sé. Está bien. That's it, you know? But this conversation of like, I want to learn more, I struggle with that because you know what? I don't want to learn more when it comes to those kinds of things because you're very comfortable in ensuring the success of my oppression and my people's oppression and other communities of color and other Q communities, women, disability, everything wants to be staying as the status quo. And I am a fighter of the status quo as much as possible. So it's difficult for me to hear that. And it's difficult for me to engage in those conversations. And I'm not saying all of them think that way, but it is very hard given what has been shown in this country by this administration and by the people who support him that lead me to believe differently. So I struggle with that a lot. But that's just me. I'm just one person.
That was fantastic. We have like a ton more questions, but I also want to be conscious of our panelists' time. I think, was it Henry? Somebody said earlier this should be a weekend retreat, right? Or maybe was that Alex? Whoever said it, right? I wish. So maybe that's next 2021. We have a Erase weekend retreat where we get we get real. But so I'll try to put a couple of these into one. And this is where, so I guess I'll leave this. I'd love to hear thoughts from our panelists, if there's suggestions that you have first. And then if there's other people that are in our chat right now that want to add into this conversation, just raise your hand. There should be an option on the participant list where you can raise hand. And then our moderator, Logan, will throw the ball to you once it's your turn. So that question I have, and this will be it. We'll close out. Again, I'd love to keep this going forever, but let's try to get outside before the sun's totally down, right? Okay, so we've talked about all this. We've heard about all these issues. I would love to know if anybody has suggestions. We've heard about these impacts to the Latino community here. Hopefully people listening to this, whether here or on Facebook, feel that call of, yeah, I want to be involved there. I want to, impact. I want to help. I want to make a difference. As we said before, like, it's not, you got to go beyond a lawn sign or a book, right? Like, we should be called to do something. So where there are some organizations that maybe you're aware of that might be a good point for someone that maybe that this is new to them, like, who could they get involved with to start taking action, either in the city, here in the suburbs, or if you don't have another thing, and this is where other people can add in too, what are some steps that you think? Anyone that feels hopefully moved to call to do something, what would you suggest? So, I guess raise your hand if you want to talk, or our panelists. I'll let you guys go first. If you guys just want to unmute and chat, the floor is yours.
Maybe you can start with Alex, since I know he has to. I think he just posted.
Yeah, I gotta step up.
Okay.
But are you talking locally in the town? Are you talking overall in Rochester? Are you talking nationally?
I think it's wherever you think would be used for someone that feels called to act now. What might be a good place for them to start? Like, whether it's a group to get involved with, a group to connect with. I'll leave it up to you. Like, where do you think someone's just like, wow, this impacted me. I don't want to just sit on the sidelines anymore. What's next?
Well, to a certain extent, going back to Stephanie's point, and this depends on different points of view. I like to make sure that my first immediate circle is where I am. So I don't want to go and tell somebody how to clean their house if I myself have not cleaned my house. So I will say start with yourself and the circle around you, and look for opportunities within that circle. And then you can start moving outside of that circle. But there's nothing better than having a personal relationship with someone to have this type of, a lot of the people don't know that they have benefited from, structural racism. So that's a very simple conversation. As a matter of fact, that lady that you talked about holding the sign, sorry it took me so long, I was getting educated myself. Guess what? She's there because it took her time to get. So we need to understand that we need to get people to that level first. We cannot go from structural racism to all the way to the goal. We have to take people step by step, because that's how they got there, step by step. So for me, I always like to take smaller approaches, because that's what I can personally do and do with my time. And that's why I take a supporting role with other folks that have the larger energy. But I'll encourage, just name your top 5 first people in your circle, and tell yourself where they are, and see if you can start having that conversation there.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. I saw Henry had to drop off. Stephanie or Rosa, is there anything either you want to add in?
I think to Alex's point, start with yourself. Check yourself before you think you could check other people. Check your own privilege, check your own bias, read a book, Google something. There's too much information out there for you to be misinformed about things. Don't assume that even your closest friends know what they're talking about. So make sure that you are out there doing the research needed for you to make some strategic and meaningful changes to your thinking and to your sphere, your circle of people that you're getting information from, Expand where you get your information from first and foremost as well. Make sure they're legitimate, they're not fake news. It's just important to always ensure that you're checking yourself and your own biases first. Everybody has them. If they want to admit them or not, that's on them. But I would say start with yourself. Don't go out here joining 10 different organizations to do nothing. Don't be a mile wide and an inch deep. It ain't gonna work for you. They're gonna see right through your craziness and then they're gonna ask you. So don't go out here occupying spaces you ain't ready to occupy. And don't go out there putting yourself in conversations you're not ready to have. That is going to be uncomfortable for you to have. If you're not ready to be uncomfortable and not comfortable to be uncomfortable, you better stay home, read a book, look up some TED Talks, some videos, some YouTube something, Google something, read a book, read about the BLM movement, read about intersectionality as well. I think that's an important conversation everyone needs to be having as well, that nobody's just one thing. So talk about, read about those topics, go to different events, take up these kind of opportunities that Erase provides, tell your friends about it, turn it into a viewing party. There's too many free resources out there for you not to be taking advantage of the free resources. There's plenty of Facebook groups out there that talk about these kind of issues as well in a safe environment. So just make sure that you're checking yourself. Take advantage of the resources that are free and available to you. And do not use your friends of color as teachers. We have the time. I'm not gonna educate you. There's people out here that are getting paid to do what you want me to do for free, okay? So make sure that you're looking outside of your, you know, your friends to talk about their personal experiences as members of communities of color, because that is emotionally taxing. Some of it is built in trauma, and my trauma should not be used for your education. So go there, and you better find somebody else. I'll come talk to you when you have different sets of questions, if you want to keep learning, but I'm not going to do the teaching for you on things you can be doing for yourself. So make sure that no matter where you come from, use your friends as free teachers. You should be getting paid for that work. So go out there, get educated, and then learn about your place in those spaces. It is not up to you to tell the organization how what they're doing. That's not your place. Your place is to provide resources as needed, whether it be human or capital or otherwise, whatever. Just know your place, know your space, and don't occupy someone else's space. And don't speak on behalf of other people either. Just come from an authentic place. Lean into your privilege, lean into the discomfort, be real, but be honest about your experiences and what you will hope to learn by being part of these different kinds of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Rosa, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Again, you know, this is like my mantra lately, you know, our lives are shaped by our experiences. So I'm constantly trying to expand my experiences, especially as a person of color. Like I grew up with my grandmother calling me prieta and, you know, all these other derogatory Black terms. So, you know, even within my family, I'm discriminated against because of my color. And that definitely shaped me to, you know, be the person I am. And even now, like I'm part of the 21-day racial equity challenge, which, oh my God, it's like, it's really great because it really does tell you, it informs you of all these things. Like I had no idea that the Hispanic families made an average worth of $191,000 as their income, when white families make an average of $934,000. Holy, that's just insane. So like this, you know, United Way, thank you for definitely informing us of all the many inequities that are in Monroe County. You know, after moving here, I learned about the redlining districts and all the horrible inequities that families had to deal with in that time. And it wasn't that long ago that there were still these redlining district policies being enforced. So we really need to, I think, now, thank goodness that Biden and Harris are in office, we need to take this opportunity to bring all these things up to light. These are the issues that our community needs to work on and needs to fix and needs to make sure that everyone in the community is represented. And I really want to be a part of that because, it's good to talk about it, but you really have to be part of the change. So, it felt good after Daniel Prude being out in the pavement and doing all the work, but we have to keep doing the work, and I know it gets tiring, but we need to stay on it. And I think that's hopefully what we could end on.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosa. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add? Now we can wrap it up.
I'll just add this. Remember to breathe and practice self-care with everything that's going on. We don't do that for ourselves enough, and we need to be doing that more for us and for our families, especially our young people. So make sure everybody just takes a moment to disconnect sometimes, breathe, call a counselor, call a therapist, go work out, go take a walk. Just remember that we too are allowed self-care.
Thank you, Stephanie, because that's a big one with our community. We do not have good mental health care for ourselves. And that's so important.
Yeah, I agree. It's something we need. I mean, I respect in the heat of everything, Free the People took that opportunity to, as an organization, say we need to stop and give people space. It's something like, as much as we're all celebrating right now for, being hopeful for the January 20th when we're gonna, kick the Cheeto out the door. That doesn't mean the work is done. Like, there's a lot of work, and as we've all kind of, a lot of us have touched on here, that the problems that this current administration promoted and reveled in are not new problems to this nation. A lot of it is just taking a cover off, right? And that doesn't all go away. In fact, part of the thing I know that I have concerned about going forward is that, well, once again, as we have, just go back, especially us white people, like, go back to saying, oh, we're good. It's not, it's not the 60s. It's not Jim Crow. Like, everything's fixed now. And it's not. We have a lot of work. Within a race, we have a lot of stuff we want to do. The work continues. So, celebrate today. I'll wrap it up now because I see it looks like we got like a sliver of sunlight left. So I want to give that to all of you, especially our panelists. Again, I know Alex and Henry had to leave. Stephanie, Rosa, all of you, just, man, speaking only for myself, this is powerful, very moving, and just a lot. I learned a lot. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, but also your emotions, your experiences. We're a diverse community, and I think we heard a lot of that here in our discussion today. So, I'm going to go and start working on that weekend retreat, or a part 2 or something. I feel like we got so much more. So again, thank you so much, everyone that's kind of watching here or through Facebook. Again, this will be saved on Facebook, and we'll look at making it available outside of that too. I feel like I want to go back and hear all this stuff again. And then hopefully there'll be more. If you aren't involved in a race, check out our page. Now, again, I have links to some of that within the event page too. So, the work continues. And again, with having people like Rosa involved with us here, we're going to keep moving. We aren't here to just have chats or online chats and, post blog articles and sell yard signs. We're here to make change. So let's do that. All right, everybody, again, thank you so much for being here and sacrificing, again, a beautiful day for this important thing. Let's go out and celebrate. All right.